Welcome back to the deep dive. So imagine this. You spent like 10 years building a really flawless, highly authoritative website.
Oh, wow. A decade. That is a lifetime in SEO.
Right. It is. So you've earned your rankings, your traffic is super stable, your brand is totally trusted, and then you decide to scale up.
Okay. Always a risky moment.
Exactly. You open up a brand new section of your site where third-party vendors can basically create their own landing pages.
Ah, right. User-generated content, the classic UGC pivot.
Yeah, exactly. Hosting user-generated content. But then, almost overnight, you're just watching your search console light up with errors.
Oh, no.
Yeah, your performance metrics are suddenly slipping, and you are terrified, like legitimately terrified,
Yeah.
that one bad vendor is going to drag your entire decade-old marketing site down the search rankings.
That's a nightmare scenario.
It really is. And today, we are dissecting a real-world panic from a Reddit user who is facing exactly this scenario.
It's such a common situation, too.
It is. And they basically want to know, to save their main site, should they quarantine all this new vendor content on a subdomain, or like isolate it completely in a brand new root domain, or maybe just keep it close in a subdirectory?
Well, the stakes for this user are just incredibly high. And I think it perfectly encapsulates why site architecture is, it's never just a technical decision.
Right. It's strategic.
Exactly. It is a strategic defense mechanism. But what's so fascinating about this specific Reddit post is that the user's proposed solution, it's driven by entirely the wrong diagnosis.
Okay, let's break down that diagnosis. Because if you manage a growing site, you've probably stared at your own analytics and felt this exact same panic.
Oh, absolutely.
So the user explicitly stated they want to restructure their domain to, and I quote here, increase page vitals so that it ranks better.
Right.
They are looking at the heavy, totally unoptimized images that these vendors are uploading, watching their core get vitals slip, and assuming they need to just rip up their domain architecture to fix it.
Yeah, and that is...
Is completely restructuring your domain just to improve core web vitals a bit, like tearing down your house and rebuilding it just to fix a drafty window?
That is literally the perfect analogy. It is a massive overreaction. The underlying assumption here is that core web vitals are, a primary driver of search rankings.
And they aren't.
They really aren't. Let's look at what they are. You've got LCP, or largest contentful paint, which is just about loading within, 2.5 seconds.
Okay, so speed.
Right. Then INP, interaction to next, paint how responsive the page is, ideally under 200 milliseconds. And CLS, cumulative layout shift, which is just visual stability.
Like when you go to click a button and the page jumps and you click an ad instead.
Exactly. The worst. But Google's own documentation clearly positions these page experience metrics as a tiebreaker, not the actual engine of their algorithm.
I think we really need to emphasize how that algorithm actually weights these signals.
Yeah, please do.
Because if you have a perfectly optimized technical site with thin, unhelpful content, and then you have a slightly slower site with incredible, highly relevant information.
The slower site is going to win. Every single time.
Right. It wins the query.
Precisely. Google systems, they seek to reward the most helpful content above all else. When multiple pages have equally high-quality information, well, then the algorithm looks at page experience signals to determine the winner.
Just to break the tie.
Exactly. But isolating slower vendor pages onto a subdomain, it won't magically catapult the main site's rankings. It just shifts the performance data into a different bucket in Search Console.
Okay, so if the core web vitals aren't the real issue, there's this other metric driving the user's panic, and that's crawl budget.
Yes, crawl budget.
They're seeing thousands of these new vendor pages flagged in Search Console as crawled, currently not indexed.
Which is so frustrating to see.
It is, and it's incredibly common to look at that status and just assume Googlebot is exhausted, like it literally ran out of budget to process the site.
Which fundamentally misinterprets how Google allocates crawling resources.
How so?
Well, for a massive enterprise site, with millions of rapidly changing URLs, crawl budget is a genuine technical bottleneck. But for the vast majority of sites, including this user's 10-year-old marketing site, raw capacity is just not the issue.
Wait, really? Because people talk about crawl budget all the time.
I know, but look at the limits. Google Search Console allows you to submit up to 500 sitemap index files, and each of those files can contain up to 50,000 URLs.
Oh, wow. So that's
25 million URLs. The infrastructure is designed to ingest massive amounts of data. Googlebot isn't tired.
Okay, so if Googlebot isn't tired, Why is it crawling those vendor pages and then just abandoning them before they hit the index?
It's a matter of trust and perceived value. You see, the indexing phase happens after the crawl. Google systems process the HTML, they render the content, and then they make a qualitative evaluation.
So they're actually judging it.
Exactly. If a vendor has uploaded, say, a thin, generic brochure that offers no unique value to the broader web ecosystem, well, Google simply chooses not to store it in its index.
Because space isn't unlimited.
Right. The space in the index is finite, and it's computationally really expensive to maintain.
So knowing that crawl budget isn't the real bottleneck here, that forces us to look at the actual culprit, which is algorithmic trust.
Yes.
Google is crawling these vendor pages but choosing not to index them because it fundamentally doesn't trust the content yet. And that lack of trust, that dictates how you need to physically structure the site.
Which brings us right to the age-old, fiercely debated SEO dilemma.
Subdomain versus subdirectory.
The classic battle. And if you consult Google's official documentation or if you listen to their search relations team, you'll get an answer that frustrates the SEO community to no end.
Yeah, spokespeople like John Mueller and Matt Cutts, they've consistently stated that Google Web Search is basically fine with either setup, right?
Yep. They say their systems learn how to crawl both subdomains and subdirectories effectively.
Right.
The official advice is essentially just, choose whichever structure is easiest for your server administrators to maintain long-term.
Okay, but I have to challenge that a bit.
Go for it.
Because if Google's documentation says subdomains and subdirectories are roughly equivalent, why does the SEO industry aggressively push back on that?
They really do push back.
Yeah, you have veteran voices like Rand Fishkin basically calling Google's stance disappointing.
Ugh.
And he argues that subdirectories almost always outperform subdomains in the wild.
He does.
So are SEOs just clinging to outdated correlation data, or is there an actual mechanical reason for this discrepancy?
The SEO community is observing a very real phenomenon, but they sometimes misattribute the cause.
Okay.
It isn't that Google has a hard-coded algorithmic preference for a slash over a dot, The discrepancy comes down to how human developers actually build and link websites.
Oh, interesting.
It's about the flow of PageRank and internal link equity.
Okay, let me try an analogy here. Putting vendor content in a subdirectory, it's sort of like adding a new bedroom to your existing house.
Yes.
It inherently uses the same plumbing.
Yes, exactly.
The internal link equity flows naturally because a subdirectory almost always sits within the global navigation structure of the site. So the overarching document object model, the DOM, it pushes authority from your high-ranking homepage down to that /UGC folder natively.
That's right.
But a subdomain is like building a guest house in the backyard.
Yep.
It's on the same property but totally disconnected. It requires its own plumbing.
That is the exact mechanical difference. When developers spin up a subdomain, say, ugsic.example.com, it frequently lives on a completely different server or a different content management system.
Because it's easier to manage that way.
Exactly. And because it's detached, it rarely gets integrated into the main site's primary navigation menu. You might get like a single link buried in the footer.
Oh, I see.
So mathematically, Google's crawler hits the main site, follows the dense web of internal links to all the subdirectories, and passes authority. But the subdomain just sits there, isolated, totally starved of that internal link equity.
So if our Reddit users' only goal was to take their 10 years of hard-earned marketing authority and just force-feed it to these new vendor pages, a subdirectory would mechanically be the easiest way to ensure those pages rank quietly.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. From a pure authority sharing perspective, the internal linking habits associated with subdirectories definitely win. But if we look back at the user's original scenario, they explicitly stated they are terrified of this new content threatening their main marketing site.
Which completely flips the strategic objective.
Oh, completely.
We are no longer talking about sharing authority. We are talking about containing risk.
Exactly.
If a subdirectory is so superior for passing PageRank, we have to acknowledge that it's also superior for passing algorithmic penalties.
Oh, 100%. When you host user-generated content, you aren't just inviting vendors into your ecosystem. You are inviting automated spam networks.
Malware distributors.
Bad actors, all of it. It's the Wild West.
And this is where we really have to look closely at Google's spam policies. Because if an automated script compromises a vendor account and generates thousands of thin, keyword-stuffed affiliate pages, Google doesn't just penalize those specific pages, do they?
No, they don't. Their systems are designed to recognize scaled content abuse. If those abusive pages are sitting in a subdirectory deeply woven into your site's architecture,
Using the same plumbing.
exactly, then the algorithm views your entire domain as compromised. The whole house floods.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Let's talk about a specific policy that recently sent shockwaves through the industry, the Site Reputation Abuse Policy.
Oh, yeah, that was a big deal.
The documentation defines this as publishing third-party content on a host site, mainly to capitalize on the host's ranking signals. So by offering these landing pages to vendors, isn't our Reddit user setting themselves up for a massive reputation abuse penalty?
It definitely looks like a direct violation on the surface, but Google's web spam team actually included a highly specific exemption in the documentation.
Really? What kind of exemption?
They explicitly exempt sites that are fundamentally designed to host user-generated content. So they give examples like forum websites, comment sections, or platform-as-a-service providers.
So the Reddit user is completely safe. They don't have to worry about this policy at all.
Well, not entirely. They are exempt from the on-revocation abuse manual action, sure. But they are absolutely still subject to Google's general spam policies.
Spam is still spam.
Exactly. If the vendor section becomes a repository for scraped content, or if a bad actor uploads a payload that triggers the Safe Browsing API, Google is going to take a manual action against the site.
So they'll just demote the whole thing.
Yeah, the web spam team will demote the domain in the search results just to protect users.
Okay, so buying a completely new root domain, say vendorservices.com, that gives us total risk containment.
Sure.
It's an isolated island. If the vendors flood it with spam, the 10-year-old marketing site remains untouched. But strategically, that seems like a nightmare because you're starting from zero brand authority.
And zero trust. Yeah.
Right. So is the middle ground here just relying on the subdomain as a firewall?
It is the most practical middle ground, yeah. And it's exactly the architecture that massive enterprise platforms like Shopify use for their user-generated components.
Oh, that makes sense.
But we do need to be careful with the word firewall. A subdomain isn't a magical, impenetrable shield.
Because Google knows who owns it.
Exactly. Google systems are sophisticated enough to understand brand association across a primary domain.
So how does the firewall actually function if Google knows they are connected?
It basically functions through the mechanics of manual review and algorithmic partitioning. So Google's own explicit content guidelines actually advise webmasters to group highly volatile or adult content onto a separate domain or subdomain.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and this tells us that their systems can and do treat subdomains as somewhat distinct entities when applying site-wide evaluations.
So if your ugsy.example.com subdomain gets completely overrun by vendor spam,
a Google analyst or an automated system can apply a manual penalty specifically to that subdomain, leaving the example.com root domain functioning normally.
okay, so it gives you the technical flexibility to quarantine the bad actors.
Exactly.
But, I mean, setting up a subdomain and just hoping for the best isn't the strategy.
No, definitely not.
You still have to manage that environment. Or you're just hosting a spam graveyard that reflects really poorly on your brand.
Right.
So how do you actually moderate it? The sources provide a fairly robust moderation toolkit for taming this UGC Wild West.
Yeah, they do. And the very first layer of defense has to happen at the server level way before a page is ever generated.
Like blocking bots.
Exactly. You have to block automated account creation. Because the economics of web spam rely entirely on volume.
Right. They aren't typing these out by hand.
No way. Spammers use automated headless browsers to fill out forms and generate thousands of pages a minute. So implementing CAPI-THA systems or requiring multi-factor authentication for vendor signups, it drastically increases the cost and friction for spammers.
But once they're in the system, because some don't get through, you have to monitor what they are uploading.
Yes.
You mentioned the Safe Browsing API earlier. How does a site owner actually implement that mechanically to protect their subdomain?
Well, you basically configure your web server to pipe all incoming vendor URLs and file uploads through the Safe Browsing API payload before they are ever published to the live DOM.
Okay, so it intercepts it.
Right. The API checks those assets against Google's constantly updated lists of malware, unwanted software, social engineering signatures, all of that.
And if it finds something bad.
If the API flags a match, your server just drops the HTTP request. The page is never created, and the threat never even reaches your subdomain.
Wow. Okay, that handled the malicious payloads.
Yeah.
But what about the sophisticated human-sounding spam?
Ah, The tricky stuff.
Yeah, the thin affiliate content that doesn't technically contain malware, but offers zero actual value to the web. There's a strategy in the documentation here that I find completely fascinating, and it's building a dynamic user reputation system.
It is honestly one of the most elegant solutions for managing UGC at scale.
It's kind of like a probationary period at a new job, right?
That's a great way to think about it. Instead of trying to review every single piece of content manually, which is impossible, you build an automated probationary period right into your platform's backend database.
So when a new vendor signs up, their account is flagged as untrusted by default.
Right.
And here's where the technical SEO application comes in. You program your server to dynamically inject a noindex robots meta tag into the HTML header of any page generated by an untrusted user.
And that completely breaks the economic model of the spammer.
Because it can't rank.
Exactly. A spammer's entire goal is to hijack your domain authority, get their links crawled, and have those pages indexed by search engines so they can manipulate rankings.
But the tag stops it.
By applying a noindex tag, you are explicitly telling Googlebot, hey, you can crawl this page, but do not store it in your database. The spammer gets zero visibility and zero SEO value.
They're essentially shouting into a void.
Literally.
I imagine spammers run automated audits to check if their injected pages are indexing. So once their tools detect those noindex tags across your entire subdomain, they realize your site offers no return on investment.
And they just abandon it for an easier target. You completely cut off their oxygen.
But the brilliance of the reputation system is that it's dynamic, right?
Yes, it adapts.
As a legitimate vendor proves their value over time, maybe by generating real organic traffic, or receiving positive reviews from users, or even just passing a manual spot check by your moderation team, their database status upgrades to trusted.
And the server automatically strips the noindex tag, which allows Google to finally index their high-quality content.
It perfectly solves the indexing problem the Reddit user was originally panicked about.
It really does.
But it solves it through quality control, not some desperate domain restructuring.
Exactly. Though we also have to address the outbound links.
Oh, okay.
Because even if a vendor's page is held out of the index, the links they embed within their content can sometimes still send signals to search engines. And Google demands transparency when it comes to outbound links in user-generated content.
Right, because buying, selling, or just manipulating links is one of the oldest spam tactics in the book.
Yep. The documentation insists that all outbound links in untrusted UGC should automatically have the real equals UGC or real equals nofollow attribute appended to the HTML anchor tag.
And mechanically, what do those tags actually do?
They instruct search engines not to pass any PageRank or algorithmic trust through that specific link. You are basically telling Google, look, we host this content because it's a vendor platform, but we do not editorially endorse the destination of this link.
So it further insulates your subdomain's reputation.
Exactly. And just like the noindex tag, you can tie that real equals UGSTay attribute to your user database.
Oh, so once a vendor earns trusted status, you remove the attribute.
Right. You reward them with the ability to pass link equity.
So if you are listening to this and you find yourself in a similar position to our Reddit user, let's synthesize the actual blueprint for moving forward.
Yeah, let's summarize it.
First, do not let fluctuating core web vitals push you into a massive architectural overhaul. Rebuilding your house to fix a draft is terrible engineering.
Absolutely.
Vitals are a tiebreaker. And if your pages are crawled but not indexed, you have a trust bottleneck, not a crawl budget deficit.
And despite their flawed reasoning, the user's instinct to separate the vendor content was actually strategically correct. Migrating UGC to a subdomain is the optimal move for risk containment. It doesn't inherently boost your rankings, but it establishes a really crucial partition.
It gives you the necessary distance to quarantine third-party chaos without sacrificing your overarching brand identity.
Yeah.
And then you pair that subdomain with aggressive server-side moderation blocking automated scripts, utilizing the Safe Browsing API and implementing a dynamic reputation system that uses noindex and real equals UGC tags to choke out spammers.
You transform a massive SEO liability into a secure, scalable platform.
It really is a complete 180.
It is. But, we've spent this entire deep dive dissecting the mechanics of domain structures, algorithmic partitions, and HTML tags, all of which exist purely to signal trust and authority to Google's current architecture.
Right.
But stepping back, this entire conversation relies on the premise that search engines can accurately assess the origin and intent of a piece of content based largely on where it lives on a server.
And with the explosion of generative AI, That premise is starting to look incredibly fragile.
It really is. Generative AI makes creating highly sophisticated, human-sounding spam infinitely cheaper and faster than ever before.
Yeah, the volume is staggering.
If an automated network can build a perfectly structured, authoritative-looking subdomain populated with contextually relevant content in a matter of seconds, well, the architectural blueprint loses its meaning.
Oh, wow.
It raises a pretty profound question. Will search engines eventually be forced to abandon domain architecture entirely as a proxy for trust?
That fundamentally changes the premise of SEO.
It does.
If the domain architecture becomes obsolete, we're no longer optimizing servers. We're optimizing human verification.
Exactly.
We might be moving toward a web where search engines only rank content based on the verified cryptographic reputation of the individual human author, regardless of whether that content lives in a subdirectory, a subdomain, or even a decentralized ledger.
It's a huge shift.
In a few years, where you host your content might not matter at all compared to who you can mathematically prove you are.
It is a paradigm shift that every platform dealing with user-generated content needs to start preparing for today.
Something to definitely mull over. Keep questioning the digital infrastructure around you, keep looking for the real reasons behind your analytics, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.